I'm Jeremy. Today is day 252 of reading. Today we're reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Let's get started. On page 254. Let's go. So what? Harry muttered. Ron shrugged. Just to clarify the procedure that we will be following this year. But first, let me introduce, for those who do not know them, Mr. Bartimaeus Crouch, head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation. And there was a smattering of polite applause. And Mr. Ludo Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports. There was a much louder round of applause for Bagman than for Crouch. Perhaps because of his fame as a beater, or simply because he looked so much more likable. He acknowledged it with a jovial wave of his hand. Bartimaeus Crouch did not smile or wave when his name was announced. Remembering him in his neat suit at the Quidditch World Cup, Harry thought he looked strange in wizard's robes. His toothbrush, mustache, and severe parting looked very odd next to Dumbledore's long white beard and hair and beard. Mr. Bagman and Mr. Crouch have worked tirelessly over the last few months on the arrangement for the Triwizard Tournament, Dumbledore continued, and they will be joining myself, Professor Karkaroff, and Madame Maxime on the panel that will judge the champions' efforts. At the mention of the words champions, the attentiveness of the listening students seemed to sharpen. Perhaps Dumbledore had noticed their sudden stillness, for he smiled as he said, "The casket, then, if you please, Mr. Filch." Filch, who had been lurking unnoticed in a far corner of the hall, now approached Dumbledore carrying a great wooden chest encrusted with jewels. It looked extremely old. A murmur of excited interest rose from the watching students. Dennis Creevy actually stood on his chair to see it properly. But, being so tiny, his head hardly rose above anyone else's. The instructions for the tasks the champions were faced this year have already been examined by Mr. Crouch and Mr. Bagman, said Dumbledore, and has Filch placed the chest carefully on the table before him. And they have made the necessary arrangements for each challenge. There will be 3 tasks, spaced throughout the school year, and they will test the champions in many different ways. Their magical prowess, their daring, their powers of deduction, and, of course, their ability to cope with danger. At this last word, the hall was filled with silence so absolute that no one seemed to be even breathing. As you know, 3 champions compete in the tournament, Dumbledore went on calmly, one from each of the participating schools. They will be marked on how well they perform in each of the school tournaments tasks, and the champion with the highest total after the 3 tasks will win the Triwizard Cup. The champion will be chosen by an impartial selector, the Goblet of Fire. Dumbledore now took out his wand and tapped 3 times upon the top of the casket. The lid creaked slowly open. Dumbledore reached inside it and pulled out a large, roughly hewn wooden cup. It would have been entirely unremarkable had it not been filled to the brim with dancing blue-white flames. Dumbledore closed the casket and placed the goblet carefully on top of it, where it would be clearly visible to everyone in the hall. Anybody wishing to submit themselves as a champion must write their name and school clearly upon a slip of parchment and drop it into the goblet, said Dumbledore. Aspiring champions have 24 hours in which to put their names forward. Tomorrow night, Halloween, the goblet will return the names that the 3 has judged most worthy to represent their schools. The goblet will be placed in the entrance hall tonight, where it will be freely accessible to all those wishing to compete. To ensure that no underage students yield to temptation, said Dumbledore, I will be drawing an age line around the Goblet of Fire once it has been placed in the entrance hall. Nobody under the age of 17 will be able to cross this line. Finally, I wish to impress upon you any of you wishing to compete in this tournament is not to be entered into lightly. Once a champion has been selected by the Goblet of Fire, he or she is obliged to see the tournament through the end. The placing of your name in the goblet constitutes a binding magical contract. There can be no change of heart once you have become a champion. Please be very sure, therefore, that you are wholeheartedly prepared to play before you drop your name into the goblet. Now, I think it is time for bed. Good night to you all. An age line, Fred Weasley said, his eyes blinking, as they all made their way across the hall to the doors into the entrance hall. Well, that should be followed by an aging potion, shouldn't it? And once your name's in the goblet, you're laughing. It can tell whether you're 17 or not. But I don't think anyone under 17 will stand a chance, said Hermione. We just haven't learned enough. Speak for yourself, said George shortly. You'll try and get in, won't you, Harry? Harry thought briefly of Dumbledore's insistence that nobody under 17 should submit their name. But then the wonderful picture of himself winning the Triwizard tournaments filled his mind again. He wondered how angry Dumbledore would be if someone younger than 17 did find a way to get over the age line. Where is he? Said Ron, who wasn't listening to a word of this conversation, but looking through the crowd to see what had become of Crumb. Dumbledore didn't say where the Durmstrang people are sleeping, did he? But this query was answered almost instantly. They were level with the Slytherin table now, and Karkaroff had just bustled up to his students. Back to the ship, then, he was saying. Victor, how are you feeling? Did you eat enough? Should I send for some mulled wine from the kitchens? Harry saw Crumb shake his head as he pulled his furs back on. Professor, I would like some wine, said one of the other Durmstrang boys, hopefully. I wasn't offering it to you, Poliakoff, snapped Karkaroff, his warmly paternal air vanishing in an instant. I notice you have dribbled food all down the front of your robes again. Disgusting boy. Karkaroff turned and led his students toward the doors, reaching them at exactly the same moment as Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Harry started to let him walk through first. Thank you, said Karkaroff carelessly, glancing at him. Then Karkaroff froze. He turned his head back to Harry and stared at him as though he couldn't believe his eyes. Behind their headmaster, the students from Durmstrang came to a halt too. Karkaroff's eyes moved slowly up Harry's face and fixed upon his scar. The Durmstrang students were staring curiously at Harry too. Out of the corner of his eye, Harry saw comprehensions dawn on the few of their faces. The boy had food all down his front, nudged the girl next to him, and pointed openly at Harry's forehead. Yeah, that's Harry Potter, said a growling voice from behind them. Professor Karkaroff spun around. Mad-Eye Moody was standing there, leaning heavily on his staff, his magical eye glaring unblinkingly at the Durmstrang headmaster. The color drained from Karkaroff's face as Harry watched. A terrible look of mingled fury and fear came over him. You, he said, staring at Moody as though unsure he was really seeing him. Me, said Moody grimly, and unless you've got anything to say to Potter, Karkaroff, you might want to move. You're blocking the doorway. It was true. Half the students in the hall were now waiting behind them, looking over one another's shoulders to see what was causing the holdup. Without another word, Professor Karkaroff swept the students away with him. Moody watched him until he was out of sight, his magical eyes fixed upon his back, a look of intense dislike upon his mutilated face. As the next day was Saturday, most students would normally have breakfasted late. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, however, were not alone in rising much earlier than they usually did on the weekends. When they went down into the entrance hall, they saw about 20 people milling around it, some of them eating toast, all examining the Goblet of Fire. It had been placed in the center of the... Thank you, everyone. That's all for today. Bye. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to read page 259. Peace out. Yeah.